unaware his wife was a secret billionaire. He moved his mistress in while she fought cancer. If your spouse brought another person into your home while you were fighting cancer, what would you do? Let us see how it unfolded. Amara knew something was wrong before she saw the woman because there were 2 wine glasses on the coffee table and Marcus had stopped drinking with her during chemotherapy. The August heat still clung to Houston when she stepped into the townhouse, one hand gripping the canvas treatment folder from her oncology appointment, the other steadying herself against the wall while a wave of nausea passed. A silk headscarf covered the hair she had begun losing weeks earlier. Her mouth tasted faintly metallic. The house should have been quiet. Instead, low music drifted from the living room, followed by a woman's laugh. Amara lifted her eyes. A pair of unfamiliar heels sat near the couch. A suitcase stood half open beside the stairs. Then Talia Brooks walked out of the hallway wearing one of Marcus's white dress shirts, bare legs disappearing beneath the hem. For one suspended second, none of them moved. Talia's face changed first. Marcus appeared behind her with the expression of a man inconvenienced, not caught. "You're home early," he said. Amara's fingers tightened around the medical folder until the paper inside bent. "My infusion finished early." Marcus glanced at the scarf, then at the pale exhaustion in her face, and something in him settled. He thought he understood the advantage. "You should be resting." Amara looked past him. Talia's cosmetics covered one side of the bathroom counter. 2 dresses hung in the hall closet. A second phone charger curled beside the bed. This was not a visit. It had been arranged. Marcus stepped closer and lowered his voice as if speaking gently could make the cruelty smaller. "Don't turn this into something your body can't handle right now." The sentence landed harder than shouting. He had taken the weakness cancer caused in her muscles and mistaken it for weakness everywhere else. Talia folded her arms across Marcus's shirt. "He told me you knew things were over." Amara did not answer her. She set the treatment folder on the entry table, carefully, because her hands had started to tremble. The top page showed her oncology schedule, dates circled in blue, including the appointment she had just returned from. Marcus had known exactly when she would be gone. Amara looked at the suitcase again, then at the bathroom, then at the clothes in the closet. She reached for her phone. Marcus exhaled. "Seriously?" She opened the camera. First the suitcase, then the cosmetics, then the clothes. "Amara, stop." She took another photograph. Marcus moved between her and the hallway. "This isn't helping you." "How long?" she asked. "We can talk about this later." "How long has she been here?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "A few times." Amara glanced at Talia. Talia looked away. That answer told her more than either of them intended. The betrayal was not spontaneous. It had been fitted neatly into the spaces between blood draws, infusions, and the hours Marcus assumed she would be too sick to notice anything outside her own body. Marcus softened his tone again. "You need to focus on getting better. I'll handle everything else." There it was. Not concern. Authority he had assigned himself. Amara looked at him for a long moment, breathing slowly through the nausea. He mistook the silence for surrender and relaxed his shoulders. Then she lifted the phone once more and photographed Talia's suitcase beside Marcus's shoes. The shutter clicked. Marcus's face changed. Amara lowered the phone and asked, very quietly, "How long has she been sleeping in my home?" This time, Marcus did not answer. Marcus looked away first. "It's not what you think." The excuse sounded almost insulting in a room where Talia's suitcase was still open beside the stairs and one of her dresses hung where Amara's coat used to be. Amara stayed near the entry table, treatment folder resting beneath one hand, the blue-circled oncology dates visible through the clear cover. Her legs felt heavier than they had in the infusion chair, but she refused to sit while Marcus stood there pretending the situation required interpretation. Talia tugged the hem of his shirt lower over her thighs. "He told me you two were basically done," she said. Marcus stepped in quickly. "We are." Amara turned her eyes toward him. "That's news to me." His expression hardened, then softened again in that careful way he had learned to use whenever her illness gave him an excuse to sound protective. "Amara, this marriage has been gone for months. You've been focused on treatment. I've been trying to keep everything together." The phrase almost made her laugh. Instead, she looked toward the hallway. Talia's cosmetics had claimed half the bathroom counter. A charger curled beside Marcus's side of the bed. Another pair of heels sat beneath the console. Marcus had not simply betrayed her. He had begun reorganizing the home around the assumption that she would be too exhausted to object. "So you kept everything together by moving her in?" she asked. "She's been staying here because things between us are over." "According to who?" "According to reality." Marcus folded his arms. "You need to stop acting like this came out of nowhere." Talia watched him with the quiet confidence of someone who had heard this version many times before. "Marcus said he was waiting until you were stronger to make everything official." Amara's gaze returned to her husband. He did not deny it. Instead, he took another step toward her. "Look, you don't need more stress right now. We can handle this like adults. I'm not going to leave you hanging while you're sick." The humiliation shifted shape. He was no longer speaking to her like a wife. He was speaking to her like a dependent he had already decided to manage. "What does that mean?" Amara asked. Marcus exhaled as if she were making something simple difficult. "It means I'll make sure you're taken care of. Rent, expenses, whatever you need for a while. You should be worrying about treatment, not money." Talia glanced at him with approval, and Amara understood that this, too, had been part of the story Marcus told about her. Sick, vulnerable, financially exposed, grateful for whatever arrangement he offered. He believed his current income made him the stable one. He believed the woman standing in front of him needed his permission to survive the end of the marriage. Amara said nothing. Marcus mistook that silence for consideration. "Take a few days," he continued. "I'll send you something in writing so we're clear. You can stay somewhere else if being here is too much." Amara's fingers tightened against the treatment folder. Both their names were on the townhouse lease. Marcus had no authority to assign her another place to live. She did not correct him yet. She only lifted her phone and photographed the closet, the bathroom counter, and the suitcase again. Marcus shook his head. "You're making this uglier than it needs to be." "No," Amara said softly. "I'm making sure I remember exactly what it looked like." She left the room before either of them could answer. An hour later, sitting alone in the guest room with nausea rolling through her stomach, her phone chimed. Marcus had sent the promised message. He proposed remaining in the townhouse, dividing ordinary marital assets later, and covering several months of her living expenses while she continued treatment. The final line read, "I don't want you worrying about money while you're sick." Amara read it twice. Then she saved the message instead of answering. Marcus thought he had just offered her security. What he had actually done was put his assumption in writing. By morning, Marcus had turned his assumption into procedure. Amara woke in the guest room with the taste of metal still at the back of her tongue and found his separation message waiting exactly where she had left it on her phone. He had already followed up once. "Let me know if you're willing to be reasonable so we can move forward quickly." She read the sentence without answering. Downstairs, she could hear cabinet doors opening and Talia moving through the kitchen as though familiarity could be established by repetition. Marcus had not removed Amara from the townhouse lease because he had no authority to do that by himself. He had not signed a settlement because none existed. What he had done was simpler. He had begun treating his proposal as if her agreement were only a formality. When Amara entered the kitchen, still wearing the soft headscarf from the day before, Marcus was standing at the island with coffee. Talia was beside him in workout clothes, scrolling through her phone. "I sent you the terms," Marcus said. "They're not terms," Amara replied. "They're your proposal." His mouth tightened. "Fine. Proposal. You know what I mean." He tapped the counter with one finger. "You don't need to drag this out while you're in treatment. I'm offering to cover expenses for months. Most people would call that generous." Talia glanced up, then back down, and Amara understood how thoroughly Marcus had rehearsed the role of provider. He was not threatening to cut off a legal right he controlled. He was using the appearance of generosity to pressure her into accepting a story in which she needed him. "I'm not signing anything today," Amara said. Marcus laughed once. "Of course not. You need somebody to tell you what to do first." She looked at him, and for a moment the room went very still. Years earlier, that sentence would have pulled her into an argument. Now she only picked up her phone. "Send everything you want me to consider in writing." His expression shifted. "I already did." "Then leave it there." Amara returned upstairs and opened a folder on her laptop containing the photographs from the day before. She saved copies of the suitcase, the clothes in the closet, the cosmetics in the bathroom, and Marcus's messages. Then she preserved his separation proposal with them. No dramatic labels. No revenge folder. Just dates, images, and his own words. She did not forward anything to Meridian Shield. She did not call anyone at the company. Her marriage was not a corporate matter, and she had no intention of turning it into one. Instead, she searched the contact information she already had for Lena Hart, a Houston family law attorney whose role now became narrow and necessary. Explain what Amara should and should not do before signing anything. The consultation was direct. Lena did not promise victory. She told Amara that if the separation became a divorce, both spouses would have to provide truthful financial information through the proper process, and that Amara should preserve records, avoid moving or hiding assets, and sign nothing she did not fully understand. Most of what I own existed. Before Marcus, Amara said carefully. Lena paused. Then characterization and documentation will matter. Amara's hand rested on the treatment folder beside her laptop. He thinks he knows my finances. Does he? Amara looked toward an older Meridian Shield folder in her personal files, one she had kept for years without needing to explain it to anyone. She did not open it yet. Less than he thinks. After the call ended, Amara saved Lena's contact information beside the rest of the records and sat in silence for several seconds. Marcus believed illness had narrowed her choices. Quietly, for the first time, Amara had begun verifying exactly how many choices she still had. Lena's first instruction the next morning was almost disappointingly simple. Preserve what already existed and do nothing dramatic. Amara sat at the small desk in the guest room with Marcus's separation proposal open on her screen, the treatment folder beside it, and the photographs from the townhouse arranged in a dated file. Lena Hart, the Houston family law attorney she had contacted the night before, explained that if Marcus intended to turn separation into divorce, the next useful step was not retaliation but clarity. Identify what Amara owned before the marriage, preserve the records supporting it, and do not sign Marcus's proposal merely because he called it generous. Amara agreed. She did not ask Lena to threaten him. She did not ask anyone to freeze anything, expose anything, or punish anyone. After the call, she opened the old Meridian Shield folder she had mentioned the night before. It was her personal copy, kept with records she had lawfully retained as a founder and shareholder. The sight of the company name pulled her back 8 years, before cancer, before Talia, before Marcus had learned to speak about her life as though he were the one holding it together. They had been sitting across from each other at a quiet Houston restaurant a few months before their wedding. Marcus had just closed a strong real estate deal and was in one of those rare moods when ambition softened into honesty. I don't ever want money to be the thing that decides who matters more in a marriage, he had said, turning his glass slowly between his fingers. Amara had watched him carefully. By then, Meridian Shield was already successful. She had never lied about helping build it, but she also knew what happened when wealth entered a room before a person did. Then don't let it, she had told him. Marcus smiled. That's simple. It can be. She meant it. After they married, she let their shared life look smaller than what she personally could have afforded. She did not need him to feel indebted to her, and she did not want every disagreement ending with a balance sheet. Years later, at a dinner celebrating one of Marcus's major commercial deals, Amara arrived late from a Meridian board meeting and slipped quietly into the seat beside him while people toasted his success. Someone across the table asked what had ever happened to that cybersecurity startup she used to talk about. Before Amara could answer, Marcus laughed and said, "She got out of the day-to-day early. Probably saved herself a lot of headaches." The table moved on. Amara could have corrected him. She could have explained that leaving daily operations was not the same as walking away, that her founder interest had never vanished. Instead, she touched Marcus's arm and smiled because the evening was his, and she loved him enough not to turn celebration into comparison. That silence became habit. Marcus stopped asking questions. Amara stopped volunteering answers that felt like unnecessary displays. What she thought was restraint slowly became, in Marcus's version of their marriage, evidence that her old company life no longer mattered much. Sitting in the guest room now, thinner from treatment and wrapped in a soft scarf, Amara turned one page inside the personal corporate folder. She did not linger on the numbers yet. She looked first at the old shareholder record bearing Meridian Shield's name and a date from years before Marcus had entered her life. Then she remembered something he had once said after that dinner, while loosening his tie in the elevator. "I like that you never need to prove you're the smartest person in the room." At the time, Amara had heard love in it. Now she understood the danger. hidden inside the compliment. Marcus had grown comfortable believing that because she never proved what she had, there could not be much left to prove. Lena did not react when Amara finally placed the Meridian Shield records on her desk. She simply turned the first page and began separating ownership from assumption. The documents were not secret files stolen from a company server. They were Amara's lawful shareholder records and materials she was entitled to retain through her founder and board role. The first record showed what Marcus had never bothered to understand. Amara directly owned 64% of Meridian Shield's outstanding voting common shares in her own name. No trust held them for her. No LLC stood between her and the company. No nominee collected the economic benefit. The shares belonged to Amara personally, and so did the economic interest attached to them. Lena looked up. These originated before your marriage? Amara nodded. Years before. That mattered in Texas. The founder's shares were being claimed as Amara's separate property because she had acquired them before marrying Marcus, although Lena was careful not to pretend that one fact erased every financial issue in a divorce. Income received during the marriage, jointly held assets, debts, and any legitimate community property questions would still require truthful accounting. Separate property doesn't mean invisible property, Lena said. It still gets disclosed and supported. Amara understood. She had never intended to hide anything from a legal process. The second question was value. Meridian Shield was privately held, so there was no public stock ticker telling Marcus what Amara's interest was worth. But the company's most recent completed arm's-length private financing provided a current valuation reference. On that basis, her 64% economic stake was estimated at roughly $1.3 billion. Amara stared at the number without emotion. It looked enormous on paper because it was enormous on paper, but it was not $1.3 billion sitting in her checking account. Most of the value was tied to a liquid private company equity. So yes, Lena said carefully, on a reasonable, current valuation basis, your personal net worth is in billionaire territory. That does not mean you can spend the company's valuation like personal cash. Amara almost smiled. She knew that better than anyone. Ownership also did not make her Meridian Shield's dictator. She served as non-executive board chair, not chief executive. The CEO and executive team ran daily operations. The 5-member board handled matters reserved for board approval, and when Amara acted as a director, she owed fiduciary duties to the corporation rather than using the company to settle personal scores. Her 64% did give her approximately 64% of shareholder voting power, meaningful authority where shareholder votes properly applied, but it did not allow her to walk into headquarters and fire people because her marriage had collapsed. Marcus had once been close enough to learn all of this. He knew she was a founder. He knew she retained equity. Early in their marriage, Amara had even told him plainly that she had never sold all her shares. Marcus had waved away the subject with a joke about startup paper wealth and gone back to discussing one of his property deals. He had never asked for the percentage, never asked how Meridian had grown, never asked what leaving daily operations actually meant. Now his separation proposal sat beside the records, offering to cover Amara's expenses as though that generosity defined her options. Lena turned back to the financial disclosure process. If this becomes a divorce, both sides disclose. Accurately. You don't minimize this, and you don't inflate it. I won't. And Marcus will receive the information through the proper process. Amara looked at his message again. I don't want you worrying about money while you're sick. The cruelty of it had not disappeared, but its logic had become almost painfully clear. Marcus had built his leverage on a financial picture he had never verified. Once Amara submitted a truthful divorce inventory supported by the existing stock ledger and financing materials, his assumption could no longer remain private or convenient. It would have to survive the record. By the time Amara finished assembling the financial disclosure with Lena, Marcus's plan looked less like cruelty in isolated moments and more like a strategy built on a version of his wife that had never actually existed. Nothing new had appeared. The pieces had been sitting in front of her for days. The photographs of Talia's suitcase and clothes in the townhouse. The oncology schedule Marcus knew by heart because he had used those treatment hours as safe windows, and his written separation proposal offering to take care of Amara while assuming she would accept a quick exit. Marcus understood some facts correctly. Amara was sick. Chemotherapy had drained her energy. She had stepped away from daily company operations years earlier. His real estate income was current, visible, and substantial. From where he stood, those facts seemed to form a simple conclusion. He was the stable one, the provider, the person with enough momentum to set the terms. That mistake was not stupidity. It was arrogance reinforced by years of incomplete information he had never cared enough to correct. He knew Amara had found her shares. He simply believed they were a minor remnant from an earlier chapter of her life. He knew she had investments. He assumed they were comfortable, not transformative. Most of all, he knew Amara hated turning money into power inside a relationship. He mistook that restraint for dependence. Lena read Marcus's proposal again and tapped one sentence with her pen. This is where his assumptions matter. The line offered several months of living expenses while Amara continued treatment. Marcus had framed it as generosity. In context, it revealed how completely he expected her to negotiate from weakness. Amara looked at the photos from the townhouse. Talia's things had appeared in rooms Amara still legally occupied as a named tenant. Marcus had begun using physical replacement the same way he used financial language. Act as though the transition were already settled, then pressure Amara to accept the story after the fact. First another woman in the home. Then a proposal telling Amara where Marcus expected to remain. Then the promise that he would keep her financially safe if she cooperated. It was not a hidden scheme. It was normalization. Marcus wanted the new reality to become familiar before Amara had the strength or desire to challenge it. Lena asked only one question. Do you want to respond to the proposal now? Amara shook her head. She had no reason to argue with assumptions that formal disclosure would test soon enough. Instead, she completed the sworn financial inventory honestly, identifying the Meridian Shield shares, their premarital origin, and the supporting corporate records already reviewed. Nothing was omitted. Nothing was exaggerated. She did not write Billionaire. She wrote facts. Lena reminded her that Marcus and his attorney, Robert Ellis, would receive the disclosure through the proper divorce process, and that mediation would come after both sides had an opportunity to review the exchanged information. Amara signed where required and closed the folder. Later that evening, Marcus texted her about scheduling. His tone was almost relaxed. I'm glad we're finally being practical. This should be simple once we sit down. Amara read the message, then placed the phone beside her treatment schedule. He still believed the mediation would confirm his role as the financially secure spouse offering mercy to a sick woman. He still believed he understood the balance of power because he understood the picture he had built in his own head. Amara did not correct him. She confirmed the mediation date and let him walk toward the room where, for the first time, his assumptions would have to sit beside the record. Marcus entered the mediation room carrying the confidence of a man who believed the numbers were finally about to prove him right. The conference room was neutral by design. Gray carpet, glass walls, bottled water, a long table with no side looking more important than the other. Amara sat beside Lena Hart, her family law attorney, wearing a dark headscarf and a tailored black jacket that hung slightly looser on her frame than it would have 6 months earlier. Across from them, Marcus settled beside Robert Ellis, his attorney, while Rachel Kim, the neutral mediator, organized the exchanged financial materials in front of her. No one from Meridian Shield was there. No doctor. No Talia. This was not a corporate meeting or a medical proceeding. It was a divorce mediation, and Marcus seemed relieved by that simplicity. He began before anyone asked him to. I want this handled cleanly, he said. Amara has enough going on physically without turning the separation into a financial war. Amara did not move. Marcus continued, leaning forward slightly. My income is stable. Hers obviously isn't right now. I've already offered to help cover living expenses while she finishes treatment. I think that's reasonable. Robert glanced briefly at the paperwork in front of him, but Marcus kept talking. I'm not trying to leave her with nothing. I'm trying to make sure she has security. Rachel raised a hand gently. Let's slow down. My role here is to help both of you negotiate, not to decide who is right. Before we discuss support, I need to confirm that the financial disclosures are complete. Lena answered first. Amara's disclosure has been provided with supporting documentation. Robert nodded. Marcus's has as well. Rachel looked toward Marcus. And you understand that any settlement discussion depends on both parties relying on accurate, exchanged financial information? Of course, Marcus said. He signed the acknowledgement in front of him without hesitation. The movement was almost casual. Amara watched the pen leave the page. He still believed the important number in the room was his income. Rachel turned to Marcus's proposal. You've suggested continuing short-term support for Amara during treatment. Yes. And your assumption is that she needs that support to maintain stability? Marcus glanced at Amara before answering. I'm not saying she has nothing. She has investments. Some old startup equity. But she hasn't been working in the way I have, especially since treatment started. Lena said nothing. Amara said nothing. Marcus interpreted the silence exactly as he always had. I've carried the more predictable income for years, he continued. I'm willing to be fair. I just don't think it makes sense to drag this out over assets that aren't really central to our marriage. Rachel stopped turning pages. Which assets are you referring to? Her Meridian shares, mostly. She kept some after she stepped away. That was before us. His tone suggested the issue had already become insignificant through familiarity. I'm not asking for those. I'm saying we should focus on the practical things. Robert's hand moved toward the disclosure packet. He had received it, but Marcus clearly had not absorbed every supporting schedule. Rachel opened Amara's financial inventory to the section listing separate property claims. The room changed without anyone raising their voice. Marcus noticed the pause. What? Rachel did not answer immediately. She checked the supporting references, then looked toward Robert. Robert began reading. The confidence in his face tightened first, not because he had discovered a new asset, but because he was finally looking closely at one already disclosed. Marcus leaned toward him. What is it? Robert did not respond. Rachel turned the inventory slightly so the relevant line faced Marcus. Before we discuss support, she said evenly, we need to make sure everyone in this room understands item 4. Marcus looked down at the words Meridian Shield Incorporated. Then his eyes moved to the ownership line beneath it, and for the first time all afternoon, he stopped speaking. Marcus stared at item 4 as if the number might change if he waited long enough. It did not. Rachel Kim kept her voice neutral. The disclosure identifies a 64% interest in Meridian Shield Incorporated, claimed as separate property and supported by the company's current stock records. Marcus looked at Amara, then at Robert Ellis. 64%. Robert was already checking the supporting schedule against the cap table included with the disclosure. That's what the record says. Marcus shook his head. No, she kept some founder stock. That's not the same thing. Lena Hart slid the supporting shareholder record slightly forward. This is the current ownership record. Marcus pulled it closer. His finger stopped on Amara's name. 64% of the outstanding voting common shares. Directly held. No trust. No holding company. No nominee. The economic interest. Belonged to her personally. Marcus looked up slowly. You own 64% of the company? Amara met his eyes. I own my shares. She did not say she ran the company. She did not say she controlled every decision. She did not need to. Lena clarified only what was relevant. Amara is the direct shareholder and beneficial owner of that interest. She serves as non-executive board chair. Day-to-day management remains with the CEO and executive team, and board-reserved matters still require proper board action. Her shareholder voting power is separate from management authority. Marcus barely seemed to hear the distinction. His attention had shifted to the valuation materials attached behind the stock record. He flipped through the pages faster now. What is this? Rachel answered. Supporting information from Meridian Shield's most recent completed arm's-length private financing. Robert's expression changed before Marcus's did. He had reached the implied equity value. Marcus saw it a second later. His hand stopped moving. 1.3 billion? The room went quiet. Lena corrected the framing before the number could turn into fantasy. Approximately that amount as an estimated value of Amara's personal equity interest based on the latest financing. It is not cash sitting in an account, and it is not the company's money available for her personal use. Marcus looked at Amara again. You're a billionaire? She said nothing for a moment. Then, quietly, on that valuation, yes. The answer landed harder because there was no pride in it. Marcus leaned back in his chair. The man who had spent the last several weeks offering to protect his sick wife from financial uncertainty suddenly looked trapped inside his own language. Why didn't you tell me? Amara's face did not change. You knew I was a founder. You knew I kept equity. Not this much. You never asked. Robert lowered his voice and spoke directly to Marcus. The ownership predates the marriage. That doesn't end every property issue, But it matters. Lena nodded. The shares are being claimed as separate property based on their acquisition before marriage, supported by the records. Any legitimate community property issues still need to be addressed separately and accurately. Rachel closed Marcus's support proposal. That brings us to the practical problem. The settlement assumptions in this proposal were based on a financial picture that does not match the exchange disclosures. Marcus reached for the document, then stopped. I was trying to help her. Rachel did not argue with him. Intent is not what I'm evaluating. We cannot negotiate support intelligently from assumptions both sides now know are materially incomplete. The humiliation Marcus had planned for Amara never arrived. No one laughed. No one called him foolish. The documents simply removed the version of her he had been using. Rachel set the proposal aside. We're pausing the support discussion. Counsel needs time to review the disclosed financial information with their clients before any revised settlement position is treated as informed. Marcus looked down at the proposal he had entered the room believing was generous. For the first time, he was no longer the person defining what Amara needed. The process had stopped long enough for the record to do that instead. The divorce did not end that afternoon, and neither did Amara's treatment. What ended was Marcus's ability to frame both as things he understood better than she did. After mediation paused the support discussion, the case moved forward through ordinary channels, revised financial positions, accurate accounting, and continued review of what was separate property and what properly belonged in the marital estate. Amara did not use Meridian Shield as a weapon. She did not call anyone at Marcus's firm, contact his clients, or turn her voting power into personal retaliation. When Lena reminded her that people inside the company had nothing to do with the collapse of her marriage, Amara agreed without hesitation. Meridian's employees, customers, and shareholders were not collateral damage. Her role there came with obligations, and she would not corrupt those obligations just because Marcus had corrupted his vows. The same restraint shaped the divorce. She did not demand that every disagreement become punishment. She asked for the records to be accurate, the characterization of property to be supported, and the separation to be clean. Marcus still had legitimate interests in whatever the marriage had actually created together. Amara's wealth did not erase that. It simply erased his fantasy that she had to accept his terms because cancer had made her dependent on him. Talia did not remain part of the negotiation. What happened between her and Marcus after the reveal was simpler and more private than scandal. The confidence she once carried into Amara's townhouse was gone. Marcus had told her he was protecting a sick wife from financial instability. Now she knew he had built that story on an assumption he never verified. Whatever future he had promised her no longer looked as solid. Weeks later, Amara returned to the cancer center for another scheduled treatment. The hallway smelled the same. Antiseptic, coffee, something faintly plastic from the infusion equipment. She wore a soft charcoal scarf and carried the same canvas folder she had been holding the day she came home to find Talia in Marcus's shirt. Nothing about the building had changed. What had changed was the weight she no longer carried into it. Marcus was not beside her. She did not look toward the elevator expecting him. She checked in under Dr. Elena Patel's ongoing care and sat by the window until her name was called. There was no miracle announcement. No sudden promise that cancer was behind her. Treatment was still treatment. Some mornings were still hard. But it belonged to her again, not to the story Marcus had built around her weakness. A few days later, they met briefly to exchange the last of their personal items from the townhouse. Marcus looked tired in a way Amara had never seen when he was busy pretending to be certain. He handed her a small box, then hesitated. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Amara looked at him. There was no anger left in her face. Only distance. "You knew enough to ask," she said. "You just preferred assuming." Marcus lowered his eyes. Amara took the box and walked away before the silence could become another negotiation. She did not need him to understand everything. Understanding had never been the point. By the time he moved his mistress in while she fought cancer, Marcus had already decided illness meant dependence, silence meant ignorance, and privacy meant there was nothing powerful behind it. The records proved otherwise. Amara had been a billionaire before he learned the number, but the victory was not in the valuation. It was in the fact that, once he finally saw what she was worth, he no longer got to decide what she needed.